ethnic minority interest groups have played an increasingly important role in the affairs of Washington since the early 20th century. One faction that stands out in terms of influence is the collection of pro-Israel pressure groups. America's support for such bodies has been a fixed truth for decades, but one that is seldom ever questioned. So, how is it that the world's most powerful nation puts the interests of Israel before its own? Some conspiracy theories would have you believe that secret deals are made in dark-lit rooms, but the Israel Lobby and the US Foreign Policy by John Mersheimer and Stephen Walt reveal that the opposite is true. There is no conspiracy. The Israel Lobby not only operates in full publicity, but its operations are part of the fabric of modern democracies, all revealing just how powerful it is. I'm your host Shirvan, and welcome to our Caspian Report review for the bookshelf. As well-respected scholars at the Chicago and Harvard universities respectively, Mersheimer and Walt are veterans in the realm of political science, both belonging to the realist school of international relations. A decade ago, the two scholars were commissioned by The Atlantic to write an essay on the influence of the Israel lobby, but when the article was finished, the editors of the magazine decided against it. So Mersheimer and Walt found a new publisher and revealed their findings regardless. They believe that an examination of the Israeli lobby merits the same scrutiny as how energy interests shape environmental regulations or pharmaceutical firms determine the policy on prescription drugs. As such, the authors look to the Israeli lobby as they would any other topic of interest. Upon publication, however, the book generated a firestorm of controversy in the United States. The authors were accused of anti-Semitism and poor research, but the book is neither. It is a scholarly analysis that reveals the deep-running ties between the State of Israel and its lobbying agencies in Washington and how these affect the behavior of the world's superpower in terms of foreign policy, in some cases even pushing the United States to pursue objectives that violate its own strategic needs. Right off the bat, the authors dismantle the moral and strategic arguments commonly made on behalf of Israel. The most persuasive case the book makes is that the alliance with Israel has been very costly for the United States. Washington's intimate embrace of Israel and its willingness to subsidize it no matter what its policies are has not made American citizens safer or wealthier. Quite the opposite, unconditional support for Israel has undermined relations with other nations and inspired a whole new generation of anti-American extremists. All this complicates and damages US foreign policy in the Arab world and to some degree the Muslim world as a whole, not to mention the tens of billions of taxpayer dollars that have been lost to support the State of Israel. So a discussion on the Israeli lobby is not only necessary to understand the geopolitical pursuits in the Middle East, but it's also long overdue. But what exactly is the Israeli lobby and how does it operate? Mersheimer and Walt define the agency as a loose coalition of organizations and individuals that dedicate their time and money to promote the interests of Israel. They do this by employing a variety of tactics such as open letters, congressional resolutions, press releases, dominating debates in think tanks, organizing meetings between civil servants and congressmen, and so on. The American Israel Public Affairs Committee and the Conference of Presidents of major American Jewish organizations serve as the two most critical organizations in the lobby. Their members sincerely believe that they are advancing American and Israeli interests, and the organizations have successfully convinced many Americans that US and Israeli interests are virtually identical when they are clearly not, at least not since the fall of the Soviet Union. Still, all of this works, because the majority of Americans, being Jacksonian, are relatively indifferent to events outside the United States. As such, a small but passionate minority can persuade policymakers to appease the interests of Israel, since doing so will not result in any significant loss of constituents, but can make all the difference in close elections. Consequently, public officials tend to compete to outdo their colleagues by showing that their pro-Israel credentials are stronger than the would-be opponent. We witnessed this exact trend in the last presidential election when both Hillary and Trump sought to outpromise the other when it came to Israel.
Together, let's defend the shared values that already make America and Israel great. Let us do the hard work necessary to keep building our friendship and reach out to the next generation of Americans and Israelis so the bonds between our nations grow even deeper and stronger.
My leading Republican opponent has promised that he, as president, would be neutral between Israel and the Palestinians. Well, let me be very, very clear. As president, I will not be neutral. America will stand unapologetically with the nation of Israel.
I love the people in this room. I love Israel. I love Israel. I've been with Israel so long in terms of I've received some of my greatest honors from Israel. My father before me, incredible. My daughter Ivanka is about to have a beautiful Jewish baby.
There is nothing illegal in the lobbying effort. The tug-of-war in lobbying is an essence of democratic politics, even if it is detrimental to the state's interests. There are many other lobbying groups, ranging from ethnic diaspora organizations to energy firms to weapon industries, all seeking to dictate the terms to the White House. But AIPAC sits at the top of the food chain in size and reach, along with the National Rifle Association and the American Association of Retired Persons. That said, the lobbying efforts do not always represent the will of the American people. In case of the Israeli lobby, they do not even represent the broader community for which it claims to speak, since most American Jews oppose armed conflict and support the two-state resolution. In general, the book is divided in two parts. The first half focuses on the domestic nature of American-Israeli relationship and the inception of the lobby. Here we learn how the lobby dominates public perception and the highest echelons of government bodies. In the second half, the authors explain how the lobby affects foreign policy regarding the Palestinians, the armed conflict in Iraq, Lebanon, and even the new theaters of conflict in Syria and Iran. It is in the second part of the book where I questioned the narrative. Mersheimer and Walt described the Israeli lobby almost in an omnipotent manner, whereby the US policy in the Middle East is almost exclusively due to the activities of the Israeli lobby. True, the lobby is powerful and congressmen walk fearfully in the shadow of AIPAC, but there are other factors to consider beyond Washington's internal politics. The reliable long-term supply of reasonably priced crude oil is one element. The balance of power among regional powers is another reason. Everything being equal, America's Middle East policy is neither dominated by oil companies, nor is it entirely the work of the Israeli lobby. Both beliefs are reductionist and lack a sense of complexity of foreign and domestic forces that shape policymaking. Still, analyzing the Israeli lobby is no easy task, nor is it one without controversy, and Mersheimer and Walt deliver a stunning source of which there are none like it. The authors take care to remain academic, untouched by emotions, moral trends, and other justifications. They approach their topic with conspicuous caution, and the book is longer than it needs to be as a result. Some sections of the Israel lobby are dated. The book was published in 2007, but the essence remains educational, informative, and meticulously written. It is a compelling source that questions whether unshakable American support for Israel is in the best interest of the United States. At the same time, the book explains the link between Israeli lobbying groups, the American taxpayer, and those who are elected to Congress and remain elected. It is one of the most important non-fiction books you'll ever read, and a must for those seeking to understand the foreign policy decisions made by the White House in the past 2 decades, especially the decisions made by the Trump government. You can purchase the Israel Lobby from our Amazon store. You can even get the audiobook for free from Audible. See the description for more details. This has been a Caspian Report review by me, Shirvan. Check out our bookshelf for more insightful books and recommendations. You're bound to find something interesting there. Anyway, thank you for your time, and Sarol.